Jackie here, my 1947 lever steer. There are signs that it has had a pretty hard life. This front wheel has been cracked and re-welded and gusseted. This front wheel has been cracked and re-welded a few times. And now that I look at it, it could be that it's cracking again. But I can see my front axle pivot here is pretty loose. And I need to get that fixed up. I can see these bolts here, wow, are quite loose. I gotta tighten that. But some of the pivot is also in this front bushing. I can see that moving quite a bit. So I'm gonna take this apart. I'm gonna tighten those up. I'm gonna clean this up and see what I can do to make this not have that big gap on the bottom. So now that I tightened up these 4 bolts, let's just give it another wiggle. See how bad it really is. It's a lot better than it was, but it still has quite a bit to improve upon. So we're gonna get this thing up off the ground and see if we can figure out how to make that tighter. I'm guessing this bushing's quite worn out, and maybe this pin has been bent. I don't know. If you haven't seen this before, this is a lever steer tractor. There's no steering wheel. It's all just mechanical purposes to make this thing steer. You can also see there's been plenty of funky repairs along the way. We've got some black pipe, we've got a bell reducer, we've got some plug welds, we've got some butt welds, we've got some tie rod ends. And honestly, I could make that all factory and new and a big bent rod, because it's supposed to be just a 90-degree bend here, a little bend here, and another 90-degree bend here on a 1/2-inch rod. But that's just character that I cannot replace. But for the sake of this, I did last year rebuild this lever. This is the trailing arm of a Model T rear axle, and all it does is pivots on the frame and runs forward backward on a drag link, and then bell cranks the front axle. It's pretty slick. Same thing with that big tie rod. That tie rod should also be just a flat bar with some pins in it. This thing's been around the block a time or two. It has been worked hard. My camber on the front axle is different from side to side. I believe this side's been hit hard enough that it bent it in quite a bit, and this one's pretty much neutral. It is what it is. This is a 1947. Doing quick math, it's really freaking old. I'm not going to replace this stuff until it breaks, because I just think it's pretty awesome the way it is. So it's time to pop that wrong tie rod end off and pop this axle out and see what's really going on in there. Every farm tractor needs a toolbox. I added this one last year and just threw a whole bunch of random tools that I have used to service this thing along the way inside it. And using some of those tools, I managed to get the front end completely apart. Now, I've never actually taken it this far apart, but last year I did manage to throw a whole bunch of grease in this area just so it could rub on the front of that frame and glide instead of wear. For the sake of this right now, I'm going to just measure this pin in a couple spots. So we got an 1'100", 106", 85", 102". So my guess is this might have been, I don't think it would have started out as a full 1 1/8" or 1'125" thou, but we're gonna say we're right about 1.1 inches. Now this right here is where it looks a little bit ugly. We got 1'150" side to side. We got 1'178" vertically. So this bushing is quite worn. This is Rooster. This is the first time she's ever been this far away from the house since we found her. She's a wild cat. So right here is what we're dealing with. This is the front bushing on the tractor. Now I already tightened up the front end and snugged up those bolts, but I'm kind of thinking if I were to just take those 4 bolts back off, I could probably chuck this up in the mill and I could use a boring bar and clean that up and find maybe a brass bushing, maybe like a 1 3/16" by 1 1/8", and I could at least bring half of that tolerance back. That might be too thin of a wall. I'm gonna have to see what I can find for bushings. I don't really want to turn down the pin on the front axle. I could probably weld that up and cut it back with a boring bar. That wouldn't be a bad idea. If I welded like a good, maybe a 1/2 inch wide, 3/4 inch wide bead inside that all the way around, now we're talking. It'd be a place to hold grease. I could machine it to fit and not have to worry about purchased parts. Now just imagine if old iron could talk. I don't understand what's going on in some of these cases. Look at this. You don't want that, buddy. This has been cut, you can see. It's been re-welded. It's been ground into place, kind of. Both sides. It's like this whole tab has been ripped off. But look at the thickness of that. That's 3/8 of an inch thick. And I can actually look down it. I don't know if you can see. I can see how twisted and worn this piece is. I probably can't I can't actually find another piece of angle iron that's this strong, I bet, today. I can't imagine finding a piece of 2 inch by 3/8. So I do want to save this. It's just incredible how much of a beating some old machines can take. Now my thoughts is I'm going to clean up even more. I'm going to get this good and clean. I'm going to wire brush the inside of this. And I do believe I'm going to run a bead of weld all around in there the best I can. And I'm going to crank that welder super hot and pretty low feed so I can just melt it. Same thing over on this side. And I might even, I'd like to make my forward and backward slop less, and my side to side slop and my up and down slop less. I guess if I can do that, I'll be happy. I do imagine I'm going to lose some of this paint today, but same thing here. I bet there's not one part of this tractor that has not been repainted. So I'm all right with that. Throw some more Regal red on, or maybe some International red. Whatever red I got in stock, that's going to work. Now, I did want to mention this side here has been welded mostly fully, but this side basically was just tacked. So since I'm going to be putting so much heat into this today, I'll be able to basically, I'm hoping I can run some of the grease that's down in there out before I weld this. So I'm going to weld up this surface here, and then I'm going to weld this even better, burn that in well, and then I'll turn around and weld this side. You can see how it's building up in there. Super clean, super nice. I'm gonna finish that edge with a little more fill wire, and I'm gonna do that edge, flip it over. There, that's built up. Yes. Now, while this thing cools off, I am doing a little bit of wire brushing with my drill, and I'm just cleaning off some of the burn off paint, some of the old stuff. I guess it's a sentimental thing. I guess it's a historical thing. But remember that, or maybe you don't remember, maybe you don't even know. This tractor was one of 50 ever built by a father and son, Elmer and Cecil Pond, who were the founders and designers and salesmen and everything of what became Wheel Horse garden tractors. It was a multi-billion-dollar company that ended up being purchased and sold a couple of times by AMC, American Motors Company, and ended up with Toro, and the brand was ended in about 2005. This was produced by the father and son who had this dream. It it's just something that, yes, I could remanufacture this. I could build it without imperfections, without wear, without being twisted or straight, or not so straight. But I would much rather try to repair what's here than just to build new. So until I have to, I'm going to keep fixing. This is very quickly becoming, what did I just do? Apparently, there is no boring bar on the mill. Okay. I found an 1 1/8 end mill. Perfect. There's no collet big enough for an 1 1/8 end mill. Okay. Now check this out. I don't know how much more sketchy this can get. I have this shimmed up, kind of eyeball centered on the lathe. I have a 3/4 inch end mill chucked up. I have squared the back of this off a 12-inch square here with a tape measure. Eyeball, eyeball, eyeball. My X and Y are all eyeballed. My Z is my depth. That doesn't matter, but my square is eyeballed from a warped piece. I could probably throw an indicator in here and just run along the edge of this. That'd be wise, but I'm gonna go on. This is still gonna be better than it was. So we're gonna start with a 3/4. We're gonna probably go to a 1 inch, and then we're gonna finish on the 1 1/8, as long as we can get that far. Oh boy, wish me luck. Yes, I also forgot to mention the fact that even though this is shimmed up, this is shorter than this. So I have a file as part of my clamping force. What could possibly go wrong? Nothing moved. Nothing moved. Okay, that's cool. This is not 1 inch, but I don't believe that the 1 inch is long enough. Wow. How could we make this any funkier? We're at 355. We're at 345 from here to here and here to here. I don't think I've touched up there yet. That's actually pretty impressive that from here to here I'm only 10th hour difference. I'm alright with that. I'm thinking I'll run the 1 inch in, because then I'll still have plenty of meat to play with. I'll run it in and just see if there's any little adjustments I could possibly do. This is also not a true 1 inch, I don't believe, but that's alright. It's bigger than I was. Oh, that's a big jump. 227, 220, 240. Man, I'm within 20 thou. I'm running it. Gonna run it. I'm gonna use this and step up as big as I can to get through as much of this meat as I can. And then I'll run that big papa through there. Stop. Don't do that. I bet I'm running this way too fast, but I don't know if I can slow it down any. Now, that did chew up quite a bit. What can I do to fix this? The end mill looks good. I'm happy for that. But the piece, the work piece, I think there's some slop here. There's probably some slop here. There's slop everywhere. I gotta see if I can slow this down any. I don't really think I can. Like it or not, I cannot slow this down anymore. I can only hope that this works out. I have to remember too that it only brought, it's 1 4 thou. So yeah, 1 6 that way. So it, say this is 1 1/8, and it brings it out to 1 1/30. I had a 1 1/50. I'm still 20 thou tighter. I'm gonna run it. I'm gonna see what I can do. If I can manage to get it in there and keep chewing the way I am, it's looking smooth. The more meat touches, the more. I don't believe that's actually going to stay true, but hey, whatever. Oh. Ooh. Probably should have cleaned that out a little bit. I was just watching all the chips flying and I was just enjoying myself. It's working pretty well. I'm quite surprised. I've got about 3/8 of an inch to go. Oh boy. I'm at the edge. Pretty much just cutting the rest of my weld that I built up. I'm through. Whew. That wasn't nerve-wracking at all. That's a keyway cutter. Ooh, it is pretty much the same size. I could just I think I'll do that. Face this off. Couple things I know. That was sketchy. That was very sketchy. Also, it's not super tight. It's not super loose. I think there's just enough room for some grease. Another thing I learned, if I was to do that over again, I might do it a little differently. Ooh, that was probably not the right way to go about any of this. I need to clean up just a little bit of that weld that I built up, and it's ready to do a little bit of a dry fit up. Oh yeah, that's honed right up. Ooh, that was not smart. Might need to clean that out a little. Oof. Yep, might need to clean that out a little. Now, I'm not much of a betting man, but I'm pretty sure if I was to make a bet, I would say that this tractor has gone a part of its life without the proper lubrication maintenance that it should have had all these years. Now, being in 1947 and it's 2024, what do we have there? 53 plus 24, 77 years old. My assumptions here are going to be that this will probably last. If it gets greased, it'll last until long after I'm gone. And I guess that's all I can do to be the caretaker of this machine. Ultimately, it'll probably outlast me. So I'm just being the steward of it until somebody else is the owner of it someday. Hopefully one of my kids. Well, I guess that's enough paint. Now, this thing is on the jack stand still. It is back together. But one of the most overlooked parts of tractor maintenance is zero gravity grease jobs. Now, if I have all the weight of the tractor on the tires, the grease is not going to be able to get to the points that need it the most, all of the wear points. So we're gonna pump some grease in until I see it coming out. All right, I see it through this little hole and I see it back there. I'm gonna just wiggle it a little bit. Grease it one more time, one more pump. Might as well just hit all my rod ends while I have it off the ground. And my spindles. Now I did just do all of this before plow day last year, so it doesn't have many miles on it, but I'm here and within reason, grease is pretty cheap. Might as well hit back here on this little pin. And the lead right there, if I can get to it. Yeehaw! Now it's time to take it off of that jack stand and see if it's any tighter with all that weight on it. I'm also glad that I took that front end apart, because as I was doing so, I realized, remember back when I tightened these up, this bolt was pretty much stripped right off. There was no threads left. Right here it is. Pretty wild, huh? So now, loose. And I need to get that fixed up. Let's see if I do the same thing, put my foot here. Did it get better? I guess you could be the judge. I'll probably feel the difference as I'm driving it. So that's what I'm gonna go do right now. I love this thing. Completely stone cold exhaust. It's probably been sitting here 3 hours now, 2.5, 3 hours. No choke. I bet one pull.